Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome to this episode on the Microsodality podcast, whatever that means. I'm hosting a conversation today about co-living and what makes good co-living, and we'll see what happens in this conversation. I am involved in a co-living project at the moment, and so is Jocelyn, who's joining me on this conversation. And I thought it'd be awesome if we could kind of mutually tap into each other's brains and like, what is it that makes good co-living? Yeah. Hi, Jocelyn. Would you like to introduce yourself a bit more in regards to this topic?
Mm. Yeah, thanks, Abby, and thanks for inviting me. Um, it was it's nice timing because I've just moved into my latest co-living project, which
Mhm.
is in Berlin, and we've started up like when did we move in? I think August, and now is November, so relatively new, and it's just been a lot to just really enjoying like the learning of having done this now, like not for the first time, but having done a few before. And
Wow.
it's nice that you invited me on this because it gives me an opportunity to reflect on how's it going and what's making it work well and what have been the
Maybe even set
experiences.
some intentions going forward. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's nice, like a retro moment for me. But yeah, in the past, I've also been part of groups forming like co-living houses here in Berlin. Did a couple, like two of those before this, but also just like informally, where it's not like we're a co-living project, but in
Ah,
Berlin,
right.
yeah, in Berlin, a lot of people live together in
In-house
what's called
shares,
like
right?
what's that?
In like in-house shares, or I don't know what you call them
Yeah,
in what would you call them, group
exactly.
house?
Like in Berlin, they call it a WG, WG, which is like a Wohngemeinschaft, like living house, living community.
Okay,
Yeah,
neither of the terms that I proposed in English. All right,
no, but it's a
I'm gonna
similar
begin to
concept.
try the
Yeah,
German term.
yeah,
Sorry.
all good. Yeah, no, it's often that people move in, they don't necessarily know each other, and then how do you actually live together with people who come from different walks of life? And
Yeah.
sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Um, but yeah, since then I've been doing more intentional. Since then and before then, I was also doing more intentional co-living
Mm,
experiments. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I'm just happy to be here and share my experiences and also hear some of yours and
yeah.
yeah, chat about that.
So I got a bit curious in terms of like the scale of the scale microsodality, the projects that or not projects, but the situations, the arrangements that you've been in. So it sounds like there's been kind of two or three roughly kind of more, I don't want to call them accidental, but that's the word that comes to mind.
Mm,
Coincidental,
coincidental.
coincidental group living situations. How many people were there involved in those?
Yeah, in that one, that was the first one I moved into in Berlin. There was four of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The rest of them have been very intentional and like that's the very interesting difference. I'd actually love to talk about that, like
Yeah.
how you choose who you live with and the difference that makes to the whole energetics of it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. How I can fit that. I'll just make a note of that right now.
Mm,
How to select
yeah.
people. Um, okay, so there's four, and then there were how many in the next few?
Yeah, then I moved into one which was an intentional 6-month residency, and there were 10 of us.
Hmm.
And then I was in one before this where there were again 4 of us, and now I'm in a house with 6. So it's usually
Okay.
been that kind of like
Multi
crew scale, or it's large, slightly large crew
Slightly
scale.
larger through. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. And also that it's really interesting you mentioned the one that's like kind of specifically time limited as well. So that I think that highlights all these different ways that co-living arrangements can happen. They can be coincidental, they can be intentional, they can be time limited, they can be endless because you have no idea. You might live together for 10 years, you might live together
Whatever.
for two, who knows? I think that does actually change things in a way,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
absolutely.
I'm gonna chime in regards to my own experience
Yeah.
in co-living. So I'm currently in a co-living project. within a co-housing project. So the co-housing project has roughly 30 or 40 households with lots of children, 10 or maybe 20. And then within that co-housing project, my house forms 5 of those households, because we're counted as individual households, even though we live in one little house, and that's why the house is called the House of Multiple Occupation or something like that. I can't remember. HMO. That's the term people use in England. And what else? So that's where I'm at the moment, and there's 5 of us, and it was quite intentional, coincidental, kind of halfway in between. We had to do an application process in order to join the co-housing project, and we got to know each other over the course of a year before we joined. So it was like it was a bit both, because we didn't select each other, but we self-selected ourselves in applying to the project. And then I've been here for 2 years so far, so it still feels kind of new, but also feels quite somewhat settled in the same way. No, I mean, compared to you, it's not new. I mean, you've been only for like your project for like 2 or 3 months now.
Yeah.
And then prior to this, I had also lodged with someone in another city, and that was a house of about roughly 3 to 5 people. The landlady and me, like 1 or 2 or 3 other people, depending on. It was quite a fluid house. And before that, I was in a housing co-op for quite a few years, like 4 years, and there was 2 houses in that project, and roughly 7 to 8 people in each house. So in total, the community was roughly about 16ish. But yeah, but having sub communities within those, and then a few 2 or 3 more kind of coincidental co-living, group share, house share houses before that, with roughly 3 to yeah. There we go.
So all sorts of different like scales and places in life, and yeah, I hear that also like a bit of a tapestry of different dynamics of coming together in your experience as well.
Yeah, it's been quite varied in some ways, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was interesting for me just like when you were saying that you kind of were kind of intentional, coincidental in this one now. Like
Yeah.
I think and that you said you knew each other for a year already, and that's also an interesting factor in how well do you know each other before you moved in. Because in this house, I've known 3 of the 5 people for at least 2 years. Yeah, at least 2 years each of them, and we've been actually looking for something together and like developing, like intentionally forming like bonds of emotional support and like meaning and intimacy as a micro solidarity pod, which is a form of crew. Pod is like a crew for more like emotional support and belonging. And then we found this place, so we're already like deeply involved. And then 2 people in the house now actually don't know us, and it was an interesting way of like I think we did quite a good job actually um, of being transparent and like communicating about that, because it could have been something that would have been a bit uncomfortable or even like create some disconnect. Like, oh,
Yeah,
4 people know each other well, and 2 don't know people very much at all.
especially if they didn't know and they only found out in the course of living. I think that would
Yeah,
be an annoying surprise.
that's what happened in the 10-person community that I was in. I could talk more about that. 'Cause yeah, it's like I've had different experiences of where it's been handled well and where it's not been handled well. And I learned a lot from the mistakes or the challenges, not mistakes. Are like, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, interesting. I'd love to also hear more about how you've navigated so far that kind of dynamic between knowing people, and the people you didn't know as well. Um, so there's that, and there's also I have another curiosity around how has it made a difference in comparison to your previous like living arrangements.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but okay, let's move into our other question now. What was it? Yeah, why would you do this in the first place? Who's crazy enough to like
Oh.
be so into co-living on purpose, kind of, rather than I think a lot of people get into co-living because they're kind of forced to, or in some kind of way, or they don't even
Mm.
think about it. But yeah, why would somebody ever want to be quite intentional about co-living? Or yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I mean, as you mentioned, of course, some people may do it more for economic reasons, as it might be cheaper. But I'm gonna talk more about like on a like relational level, like um,
Mhm.
assuming you could choose to live on your own or with other people. Um, I don't know. I think for me, it's I'm people different, and I think that's an important thing to know yourself. Like, what actually helps you to thrive. I'm someone who I get a lot of energy and like sense of aliveness and meaning and purpose in relationship to people, and I get like energized by my batteries get filled by being with people who like, people I feel belonging and connection with. Um, and I don't like living on my own. Um, I but even as someone who likes to have their alone time, I think there's something about living in community where obviously there's like an economic benefit where when you're sharing food and sharing resources, it's a lot like economically cheaper.
Mhm.
I once looked at like how much I was spending on food per month when I was living together in this 10-person place, and it was like €200. And when I was living on my own, I think it was double that.
Mm.
Um, and I was like quite surprised by how that would be. But also just in terms of um, my sense of well-being is much improved living together because I don't have to cook for myself every evening. So like here we often cook for each other for dinners. We do our own breakfast and our own lunch. Um, but it means that like when I'm cooking for myself, I get kind of bored and I end up maybe cooking more sloppy things or not eating so healthily. But when you're
Mm.
cooking for others and a group, I feel more invested in like making something that's healthy and good for people.
Yeah.
Um, so I like eat much more healthy. We also support each other. I think in trying new dishes and new foods, that's really interesting as well because everyone cooks a bit different.
Mhm.
Um, but there's also just like the time. I mean, to cook 3 meals a day and to clean an entire house or a flat or your own place, it's so much less work when you're living together and you can split up that like the domestic chores. Um,
Mm.
we here also have a cleaner because it is a large house, and we are all like working um, like enough hours that cleaning can sometimes get pushed to the back. And as it's so big, we noticed okay, we need a bit extra support. And that was something that at first I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. We should be able to do it on our own. But
Mm.
then there's always for me the element of yeah, there's some maybe starting points of my ideals, and then looking at what are the actual needs of our group, and then like being flexible to adapting to what makes sense for this particular constellation.
Mm.
So that was nice for me because we have actually got quite a lot of things to do to the house to make it more cozy and more livable. So we didn't want to. We thought maybe if we have a cleaner, then we can put our energy and time more towards beautifying and making it more cozy and fixing a few things that had just been left in disrepair by the people who had been living here previously. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, that's yeah, that's very practical. I can speak a lot more on like emotional level as well. Um, but yeah, is there anything you want to like jump in on before I talk about maybe the
I
emotional
just want
benefits?
to acknowledge, like, that, when I heard you talk about, like, that cooking for others and how when you cook for others, you're more motivated to kind of almost make the dish more beautiful and healthy.
Mhm.
Good for yourself. It's kind of sad, but that's I feel like that's it really resonates with my own experience as well, and I just, like, lit
Yeah.
up hearing that it's I feel like hearing that's also the same for you,
Yeah.
and yeah, you're totally right, like, around cooking and cleaning, like, having 5, like, adults in a household is like a superpower in some ways, like, I a lot of my neighbors are, like, couples or single, uh,
Mhm.
and, like, when you're taking care of kids and you're only, like, you're in a household of 5, but 3 of them are kids, and it's you and your full-time working husband or something, or your full-time working wife, like it's just kind of like the cooking and cleaning is really difficult to juggle. And like I noticed that in my house we furnished the house really fast, even though we didn't have much of our own furniture,
Mm,
because we were five adults who were all very like able to like go ahead and go and get that furniture and go like paint
yeah.
up the house. We decorated so much faster than everyone else, which was really weird to me because we actually didn't have that much furniture compared to everyone else. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to hear more about the kind of the emotional side. I think it is a bit hard to put a finger on in some way. I'm sort of thinking, so for example, if you had like an emotional difficulty come up in your life, in your personal life in general, what happens versus when you're living alone, versus when you're in an intentional kind of co-living project?
mm,
Maybe that might
mhm.
be a way in for you.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I could speak from my experience now, but it's also just interesting reflecting on that more coincidental co-living experience when I first arrived in Berlin. And of course, first arriving in a new place and you have not many connections, and
Mm,
it was very exciting. But there were also times when I was like feeling quite lost, and Berlin's quite a intense place to be as well, especially when winter came in. I struggled a bit, and I found it actually living together with people who I didn't feel that emotionally connected with kind of actually felt a bit more lonely sometimes
mm.
than if I'd maybe been living on my own and could have just let my feelings be like, like I was worried, oh, maybe people hear me crying and they're like,
Yeah,
it's kind of
yeah,
awkward if I come out, like have to kind of come out of my room and pretend I'm all right, like because I
yeah.
didn't know how we didn't have like an emotional bond, and I wasn't so experienced with building that, and I wasn't sure if they wanted it. Like we
Mm,
didn't talk about what we want from the house. It was just more of a convenience thing where everyone's like, okay, it's kind of a cheap rent. It's in a place we kind of want to live, and we ended up being here. And everyone in Britain's kind of scrambling for places to live all the time, so you often don't have much choice if you have a small budget, which I did at the time. So there was that experience, and I don't think everyone was there for like having a buddy, like emotional support. Kind of mostly it was like closed doors, and we shared salt and pepper and olive oil, and the rest is like everyone cooked their own food. So it was a very not communal kind of experience. And so there are those kinds of experiences where I would say like, oh, maybe I'd prefer to live on my own in terms of the emotionality of it or relational aspect. But now I'm in places, and since then I've lived in places where we have had some degree of explicitness about we want to live together, not just for convenience of like practicality, but because we want to create home together. We want to create a place where it feels like uh, a place we can really be ourselves, a place where we feel we can also just have a bad day and it's okay. Like I want to create a home where it's okay, where it's a good place to have a bad day. You know, that was
wow,
like kind
really,
of
really great.
yeah. And I have to say that I really love how that's something we've pretty much managed to do quite well in this group of six. And I sense the people, those of us who know each other, it's easier for us to share maybe a bit more vulnerably. But we're all people who kind of get that it's valuable for us to be sometimes like seen to have a we said having a wobbly day. um, and there have been a few moments where, like, just when you go in the kitchen in the morning, someone always asks me, "Oh, how you doing?" And it feels okay to be like, "Meh," and the answer is, "Would you like a hug?" And you don't have to say something, but it's just like, ah, yeah. And we kind of witness each other, like, if we getting better at like, okay, it's allowing each other to have a dip and knowing you don't need to like save everyone because that would also feel exhausting. If you feel like you've always got to be there for your housemates, but there's
Yeah.
enough of us, like six of us, that we kind of take it in turns to have a dip, and then others are like got capacity to hold, and there's people outside of our house as well who support us, so it doesn't feel heavy like that, but it's
Mm,
just a nice place where I feel at the end of the day, at some point, if I'm having a lonely time, I can ask someone for a hug, or someone will notice and they'll be like, "What's up?" Like, and like
mm,
my one housemate, Lottie, in particular, I remember once she was like, came and knocked on the door and she said, "You're having a bad day." And I was like, "Mm." She's like, "Do you want to talk about it?" I'm like, "Mm." I find it sometimes a bit difficult to reach out when I'm like not sure what I need, but it's just nice that
Yeah.
someone comes and asks, and I can also say no. And we've had a number of like really deep shares together just over breakfast, and I don't have to. Oops, sorry, my phone's ringing. I'll switch that off. I don't have to um, call a friend or go out and look for support. It's like it's just kind of there when I need it, and also opportunity to celebrate life is also there. So I I'm the kind of person where I want it to be like as a default. I've got kind of people around me, and if I want time by myself, I can retreat to my room, and I feel I can do that here, rather than being like I'm on my own and by default I've got my own space, and if I want a connection, I can go out and find it. I know some
Mm,
people that's what they need.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
don't think coding is for everyone. If that's what you want, I would say like maybe living by yourself, close to friends, is a better idea. But for my type of personality, I think it's really great. Yeah, I'm curious
mm.
about yeah you as well, or what comes up for you with that.
Yeah, I think personally for me, I find sometimes like the activation energy like needed to go and seek support, especially when you're already down, is like quite hard for me to access. And I'm really grateful for the moments when, you know, I'd be crying in my room and one of my housemates would come up and also like knock on my door and offer me a tea. And it's
Yeah.
just small gestures like that are really huge. And I could definitely be better at that for my housemates as well. And I think through living in intentional kind of co-living spaces, like I it's kind of almost made me try and be more aware of those skills and acknowledge them and develop them in myself.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah, and like yeah, I was just really touched by the that you know you can come down to the kitchen, you can be honest, and you know someone will offer you a hug. I think that's it sounds so simple, but it makes I think it's that's the kind of I think that's the biggest like one of a very clear example of the difference between like a more coincidental house
Yeah.
share or intentional house share and how um I think a lot of people when they think about why they want to live alone, they often think they just compare it to the coincidental house share. And in that case, it makes perfect sense why you might want to live alone. I've certainly felt really alone as well among people who I know are kind of almost on their toes all the time around me, and I'm also on my toes around them all the time because I like trying to
Yeah.
just not take bump into your space. I'm so sorry I used your olive oil instead of my olive oil. Is it okay I borrow your
Yeah.
pan today because my pan is like not working? I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, um, yeah. One of my housemates has kind of described our house as almost like a family away from family for her, and
Mhm.
that's kind of nice that she's felt like she's able to describe it that way. That's I thought that was so interesting. Yeah.
That's beautiful. You know, I feel that reminds me of actually I lived in Amsterdam and we created like a 6 month community house with four of us, and we it was like intended as a yeah, I was training as a nonviolent communication trainer then, and so was one of my other housemates, and the other and a third my third housemate was really interested in it, and the fourth housemate didn't really know much about it, was kind of curious. Um, but we created a few like events, like regular events for people to come, like community events at our house, and people just really felt the energy of what we were creating there. So when you
Mm,
can create an intentional space, it's not actually it can really be beneficial to your wider community in your city or in your neighborhood, especially when you invite people in to share from that like um, communality and
mm,
collective support energy, and people will feel it. Even if it's like just having a potluck evening, or
mm.
doing a brunch or something, or inviting a little like or having a birthday party, and you kind of create a little bit of intentionality around the focus or something like that.
Yeah,
Be really beautiful.
I found that like shared houses. Sorry, I keep
Yeah.
jumping. Co-living, shared houses, group houses, house shares. Sorry, that
Uh,
I make it clear that's all the same thing to me. But different terms people have used. I find that like intentional house shares or can be almost like beacons within a scene for people to form a scene around, which is strange because the scene also kind of gave birth to them in this in a way as well.
Yeah, I like that image. Yeah.
And yeah, you mentioned like it's the six of you, but you also find that being embedded within a wider scene of people or what other friends helps the house as well. Could you want to say more about that?
Yeah. So it's kind of like in Micro Solidarity, we talk about having crews, and then there's the congregation, which is like maybe a larger pool within which crews form, like maybe congregation like 200 people or so. I feel like in Berlin, there are, I don't know, I feel like my network of like close friends probably extends to like a good solid like 30 people or so. And they kind of regularly come through the house. There's some people who come quite often, who come co-work with me because I work a lot from home. Others are just like inviting them around, like they know what I mean when I'm like, come for a bonfire, like they know that okay, we're gonna have like everyone brings a little potluck item or something, and they all have my back as well. So um I don't feel like I have like my friends are only the ones who are in my house. And the sense of if people in my house are all a bit like overburdened at the moment or overwhelmed, which we're all working quite a lot, so it can happen
Mm.
that the weight or stress can also be dispersed into other fields. Um, we haven't had any like large group tensions yet, but it's really nice to know that if we were struggling to resolve a tension within our house, we could always like I can talk to my friends outside about the dynamics, and they're also people who kind of have a sense of what it's like to live together and like kind of connected with this like curiosity about relationality and how do you create connection and belonging, so they can support me to help like untangle and get unstuck within our house if that needed to happen,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
possibly
It's not
even come in and help us have a conversation about it. Yeah.
like your house is in the middle of the desert or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is particularly like if you're a bigger community, like I know a community of like 15 people, 15 to 20, and they have a big conflict, but they live a bit outside the city, and I I think they have a lot of people coming and visiting them, but I noticed we there was a moment when a bunch of us got together to support them with their conflict. It was like a really amazing moment for me. Basically, they were having this internal conflict, and it was a program that I was running, the Berlin Micro Solidarity Project, 2 years ago or so.
Gosh, it was 2
Um,
years ago.
yeah,
Sorry.
crazy. Time's flown. And it was amazing. We did this one. It was like we did a weekly hangout. Like we had the course, and everyone went through certain practices together. But we also had a Monday hangout. People came together in person, just talk about what they were learning from the course and mingle because all the practices was in crews. And then this was a moment for the crews to all come together and just share their experiences. And it was just very emergent, this moment where they were like, okay, well, we have this challenge in our community and we don't know what to do. And people who weren't living in the community or directly connected to it gave them all this like loving presence and some feedback, some questions just to help untangle it a bit. And they had like a bit of a like an insight moment of like, oh, maybe this is something we could try out differently, or maybe see it this way. They went back to the community and they realized maybe they need to open up a bit more to like grieving what's not been working rather than trying to like push into it and fix it all the time. When they brought that in, apparently it created quite a shift and was really helpful for them. And they needed that outside perspective from a loving, supportive group. And you know that's like so important to have people outside your community to support you when it going gets tough.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But we're already kind of slipping into the what makes good co-living, and like I'm hearing this like having that wider support really can really support the co-living within. And I wanted to point out that kind of the good co-living can support the wider scene as well, and that
Yeah,
being joy of being in co-living and how I don't know in my experience I think in more intentional house shares I've been in, often you have like kind of people who are almost just friends of the house
yeah,
who are not just your friend, but everyone's friend within the co-living project, and
Yeah.
you kind of can join almost a wider community that's just beyond just the house itself, when it's a
Yeah.
bit more intentional and a bit more communal. Yeah.
True. Like I'm actually making different friends now from with who are friends of the people I'm living with, and particularly the people who I didn't know so well who I'm living with. Like I really like when he invites his friends and I'm like, oh, these are people who I wouldn't actually get to know maybe
Yeah,
usually.
yeah.
But it like enriches my life, and they come and like all the guests bring something different. Like some people really like bringing like homemade ferments or something, or
Oh,
if someone comes and like often it's food related. People like coming with gifts, and because they know that we're like we have a lovely kitchen and have
yeah.
lots of nice like shared meals. So um, yeah, and just also something about being seen and witnessed by people outside, and people come in and say, "Wow, feels really good here." Like what you said, like someone's like, "Oh, it's like my second home." It somehow shows like you get used to the water you're swimming in, and when someone comes in and is like, "This is really precious and worth taking note of," it's like, "Oh yeah, yeah." It means something. Like we have this uh, a few structures in our house to organize how we do things and how we work through tensions, and we have it quite visibly, like even on the wall in the
Mm.
kitchen. And the number actually just this morning, I took a photo of it in case I wanted to share it here, which I couldn't in the moment. But yeah, my housemate was like, "Amazing how many people come in and like notice this and ask me questions about it." And it's like we have a conversation about how do you manage tensions and how do you like make some kind of order while not being too structured. Like, it really initiates interesting conversations, and people can learn from how you're doing it, and they get inspired. Like, oh, co-living doesn't have to just be a compromised experience of living by yourself. It can be something exciting.
Oh my gosh, I think that really does describe coincidental house shares for me. Yeah.
Yeah,
That yeah. Yeah, what is this structure thing on the wall? What does it say? What
yeah. It's kind
Very
of two
structure.
parts to it. Yeah. So this is also going into like what makes for good
Yeah,
co-living.
transition into that.
Right? Okay, cool. I'm also really curious to hear more about yours, and maybe if you want to share what kind of structures you guys use to organize your domestics and work with tensions and stuff, because
Yeah.
I know different groups do it so differently.
Mm.
But yeah, I can explain one that I've found I really enjoy using, and it was inspired by last winter I went to Spain and I stayed with Rich and Natty, and who kind of like Rich is one of the founders of Micro Solidarity, or kind of originally articulated it. For those who are not aware of who he is yet, and they ran together with support from Martina and Guy, their friends. I think they for 3 months they rented this house and invited a bunch of friends through and had a few events there, both like commercial and just like fun gatherings. And
Mm.
I was there with Nikki, my partner, for like I think 6 weeks, and every day we used this what's called like a community mastery board, and it's basically on the wall a bunch of like sort of post-it note organized space where we have a place for listing awarenesses of things that are maybe need attention or potential opportunities as well. So it might
Okay.
be as simple as like there's mold growing in the bathroom, or it could be something more like the Wi-Fi isn't working strongly enough when we all use it at once,
Yeah.
or it could be an opportunity like oh, I seen that there's like really good firewood for sale down the road, and if we could like get a truck together, we could go and pick some up and make it more affordable than the small pieces that we buy each time.
Mm.
um, so anyway, and then the next column is test. So each day, each evening, we looked at what are the awarenesses and what do we want to try out that's like a simple doable action to try and fix this. And it doesn't have to be the perfect level, perfect answer, but it's like what's something we could try out. And it's really based on like iteration, because we kind of come back tomorrow and check if it worked anyway, or yeah, we'll get some feedback from that test, and if it's worked, maybe it's something that's just more of a one-off action we had to do, then it's obviously worked, you can take it off the wall. But if it's more like a cultural habit, for example, oh, the water jug keeps the water filter keeps emptying, like okay, make sure you fill it when it's empty. If we realize that that's kind of just working on its own, then we've moved that test into the mastery list, which is on the right. So the mastery list is all of the cultural habits that we have mastered that kind of work, And it's just a nice way for also new people to come in and see, oh, this is kind of the way that things have been working quite well here. We can always make improvements to things, but it's a nice way to visualize how we are addressing tensions.
Mm,
Um, but I think even more importantly is it's like a structural rhythm that we create for helping people to address tensions when they're small before they get big. So
mm,
it could be also interpersonal tension, like feeling a bit overwhelmed by the number of guests, could be an
mm,
awareness. Or lights keep being left on. If we don't have space to address these small, even like some very practical tensions, it
mm,
kind of builds up, and then one day it'll be something that has nothing to do with the lights being kept on, or nothing to do with the washing machine never being emptied, nothing to do with the dish rag, but something more interpersonal, like maybe a more relational thing. But because of the build up of like small frustrations, that like interpersonal relational tension can suddenly flare up into something much bigger. Um, because something about seeing that the water jug's been filled, seeing that the dish rack is emptied, seeing that the toilet paper is being replenished, it like gives a sense, oh, people who live with me care about the space, and which translates also to they care about me because this is also my home. If the
yeah,
space is kind of going like, people start to feel like, well, no one cares about the space, and therefore maybe they don't care about my experience either. I'm not going to care about the space. That there is, I think, there is a correlation between um, both ways between how well the space is being cared for, particularly the common spaces,
mm,
and how well people feel like they're cared for and respected in the home. Equally, when people feel they're cared for and respected in the home, they actually tend to put a lot more care into keeping it nice. So it's a bit both ways. Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Wow, that's fascinating. I mean,
mm,
I have seen this board as well, but like
yeah.
I did not really understand it, and I think we did also use it at the gathering somewhat at the time.
Mm,
I don't think it like the way you've described it, that makes so much more sense to me in a way
mhm.
for a like continuous co-living situation rather than a temporary gathering. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, you see how that
Yeah.
things. So do you look at this board? Did you say every day, in or was that?
Mm,
Did you look at it every day when you were in Spain? But what's the frequency in Berlin?
yeah. So this is an important thing of where you need to adapt a system to your or structure to your system. So in Spain, we looked at it every day. I think we were a group of like 8, and we had a dinner together every day. So it was very easy to just after dinner, one person facilitated a quick round going through, and we just also used it to allocate the tasks for the next day as well as the community mastery board. We also had a Kanban board, which is like a list of tasks, a to-do column and a done column, and everyone's got their name. I'll put some pictures up in a second, but
Okay.
anyway, let me get back to your question. So basically, we looked at this community mastery board every evening in Spain. Um, but we didn't use it in Spain when there was the Micro Solidarity Winter Gathering, which you referred to, because that was a bit more of a centralized event
Mm,
where the organizers, I think I think we did a rotation of who would be the chef for each day and planned that beforehand. And we also planned a bit of a rotation of like cleaning system. We set up like cooking and cleaning systems separately, and we weren't inviting people into a sense of co-responsibility for the upkeep of the house like on that level.
mhm,
Um, like they were there more as guests and we were as hosts. So we could have maybe done that just within our hosting group, but
mm.
it didn't make sense for 1 week.
Yeah.
But for the co-living, it made sense to have this community mastery board. Um, because all of us living there, it encouraged each of us to take co-responsibility for the space because it invited each of us to think of awarenesses like what have you noticed in the space that you think could be improved or where there's a possibility or an opportunity for doing something cool.
Mm,
Um, yeah,
okay. So you
but yeah.
have this board, you have this community mastery board in the Berlin, in your current Berlin arrangement.
Yeah, we do. I'll show you how it looks here. And we don't look at this every day, and that's because we live in a city and we don't eat together most evenings. Like there's always someone who is out, and we have to actually arrange every 2 weeks to have a house meeting to look at the board. In my
Okay.
previous four-person one, we did it every week, but it was actually quite difficult to still come together even with four people in Berlin,
Uh-huh.
especially in the summer when lots of people are away or there's lots going on in the city and we eat out a lot. There's not much, um, not many regular shared meals. We could have said like we want that, and we might have then found it easier to do this look at the board every week, but we realized we didn't want to do that. We wanted to feel a bit more free to also engage with our other friends.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. But this board now we look at this every 2 weeks. And in the meantime, we've changed it a little bit from in Almondrio and from my last house, where we've said like during the week anyone can add a post-it onto the awarenesses. So actually, when we come to having our meeting, people have kind of seen what kind of awarenesses have been up there. We might already think of a test that we want to make, or sometimes even just having it there. It's like, oh, in the meantime, it gets solved because the awareness has been brought up, and we don't need to address it.
Okay.
Um, so we kind of adapted it for us. Yeah.
So the fortnightly thing, is that kind of that's planned into your calendars. That's something you as a community have decided we're going to meet, I don't know, first of every month and 16th of every month, for example. Is that what
Yeah, we were kind of trying to do it on a Sunday evening every 2 weeks, and then some if we can't make it on a Sunday, then we'll try and find the closest day to that that works for everyone. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Do you need all six people to be there, and therefore and you would move it, or if only one out of the six people can't make it, would you still move it?
Hmm. So far, we've managed to have everyone there, but I'd say if we really couldn't have everybody there, it could still work, where you just make sure that the person whoever's facilitating, because we take turns to facilitate it,
Yeah.
would like would meet that person beforehand and just check are there any awarenesses that are important to you to bring
Oh,
up
okay.
and a
Right.
test. Of course,
It's
it's
quite
difficult. Yeah, you can do it a bit like asynchronously to an extent, but it is still tricky. I imagine if you had some awareness where you actually do need to have everyone there to test something out. Um, like some decisions, it's important to have everyone there. Some decisions, you don't need to have everyone there. It depends on like the I think for me, like when a decision is easily reversible, it's more okay that someone's missing the meeting, or if it has very low impact. For example, like, oh, why don't we actually store the pots and pans in this different drawer where they're more out of the way? Is a
yeah.
very low impact thing compared to like, hey, let's decide to plant a tree in the garden there, or build a wall, or someone's going to change rooms. Like, you'd want to have everyone there for that kind of decision.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you don't, it's kind of almost like the awarenesses is almost like a list of agenda items. Sorry.
Kind of, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a skill to like making the awarenesses not already a solution. Like at the beginning, a few people were like, we should empty the dishwasher in the mornings. For like, that wasn't a real one, but just an
Yeah. Yeah.
example. But
Yeah.
then it's like you're already zooming in on like one solution, whereas what's the actual problem? And when you can write the problem without this preconceived solution, there might actually be other solutions that come up that are better and include more people's needs when you come to the meeting. For example, it's more like, oh, the problem is every time I want to put something in the dishwasher, it's dirty and full. And then the solution might be like just simply to have like an awareness that like when it's full, like let's make sure we actually put it on, and maybe the dishwasher tabs need to be closer to the dishwasher so people can like they don't like stall on just switching it on, for example. Or maybe someone's like, oh, I haven't been putting it on because I worried it makes too much noise for the person living next to the kitchen. And then like, okay, well, let's make sure that we get into a rhythm of putting it on after 10 a.m. and not later than 5 p.m. We did that in my previous house. Made sure that we didn't make like noise in the kitchen between certain hours. And then we could just test that and see if it works. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. This is so interesting. Sorry.
Yeah.
It kind
Go
of
ahead.
need a bit of time to digest it.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'm almost kind of just imagining what your fortnightly kind of house. meetings would look like. Do you call them meetings even? I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
that's a dirty word.
I know, right? I actually notice in myself when I'm writing on my calendar, I'm like, I don't want to call it a meeting. I actually call it a
We
gathering.
call ours a meeting and we're all right with it because I mean our stated culture is like meetings are incredibly important.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I do want to change the like preconceived notion that meetings are always boring and dull, because actually when we meet, I find it very enlivening. And
Yeah.
our meetings actually bring us together because we're using it to work through conflict. And sometimes we have to bring up things that are a little bit uncomfortable, but the quality of our presence and the structure that he guides us towards, okay, what can we do to meet our needs together, is very bonding. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. So
Yeah.
do what do you call them? Do you just call them house dinners or something?
We just call it a meeting or a gathering. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
We don't actually explicitly have a dinner with it, but somehow it always ends up happening that someone's like, "I'm gonna cook dinner beforehand," and we're all sitting down to eat together while we do our the first thing we do is actually a check-in round. Usually the question is something like, how when you reflect on the last 2 weeks since our meeting, how have you been feeling in the house, and what's been coming up that you celebrate or found challenging? Yeah.
Oh, that's a really good one. Ah,
Yeah,
borrow that one. I've always
yeah,
wanted to ask that, but like I've not had like the phrase pop into my head. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, it works really well. Yeah.
2 weeks is like I feel like a manageable time to kind of
Mm.
figure out what's been going on rather than a month. Because our meetings are a month, and I feel like that means if you miss one, it's like two
Yeah,
months to your to your next meeting. You kind of disorient.
definitely.
Like, what did you guys talk about? I mean, the minute we put out the minutes, but like it's different to actually being in the experience. Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah,
that's like
exactly.
so there's a check-in. What often happens after check-in?
Yeah. Then, let me usually clear off a bit, so we have a bit of a headspace check, space to just shift mode, and then we'll look at the community mastery board.
Hmm.
No, actually, we will first look at our Kanban board, which is I said there were 2 parts to it. So let me just show you also the Kanban board.
Okay.
Right, this is the one. The Kanban is like from agile. I think it's an agile thingy process. It's
Yeah.
basically like, is it? Yeah,
It doesn't matter. It
yeah.
yeah. Uh,
Wherever it's from, I would just love to credit the people, give credit where credit's due.
well, it comes from Japanese term kanban, which literally sounds like look board. So it's like a
Oh,
board that you can just look at, and yeah. But yeah,
ah,
but I
I'm
have no
so
idea
glad.
who made it up or anything. But that's what kanban means. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm so glad you told me that, because so many people ask me what does Kanban mean. I'm like, I don't know, and I haven't
That
researched it.
can
But
means look, ban means board.
look bored. I
I'm
love it.
not
Well,
gonna
I mean,
use
that's
that.
so
I
appropriate.
recognize the kanji.
That's so appropriate because we have this at a place where we can easily see it. It's in the kitchen, and the point is that we see it there. And we regularly can like remember like what we've said we'd sign up for the week. So the first thing we do in our meeting is we go to our Kanban board and we actually start with the done column. So the done column is for, as you see, we each have uh, our name there,
Yeah.
and but beside each of our name are the tasks that we've said we would do and the ones that we've done. So it's very satisfying once you've done something. Like I cooked dinner on Thursday, I move the little tag over to the done column. Or if you've cleaned the bathroom, I think we've got different colors for like cooking tasks and cleaning tasks, and then one-off tasks. I think for the pink ones, like unplug the sink or uh, take the old bike to the bike shop. To yeah, there's quite a few random things around our house that needs doing.
So what
Anyway, so
you look at the done column first and you go like, woo, well done, or something like that.
exactly, we start with celebration because that gives us energy. Celebrating together is a really good way to start off a meeting. Celebration or gratitude is just like, oh, we can do stuff together and it works.
Yeah.
And this was happening. We even got into the point of like, it's like, oh, someone cooked dinner on Tuesday, and then was like, what was it again? Oh yeah, it was that amazing bean chili, and we like like get really into it. Like, oh my god, that was so tasty, you know. So we have a lot to celebrate. Then we look at the things that are still remaining in the to do column, and that's not it shouldn't. That's something we don't want to bring like guilt or shame to, that someone didn't do their task. But we ask them like, oh, what was the block and what support do you still need to get it done?
Mm,
Sometimes we realize, actually just wasn't that important. Let's not do it. Or sometimes it's like, well, there was another step that actually like the living room was too full for me to do this. It needs to be emptied first, or whatever.
mm, mm,
Or someone's like, I just actually found it really hard to get motivated. Can someone do it with me?
mm,
So then we would put all the things on the done column back into the tasks list on the left. So the task list is sort of like the parking lot of tasks that we potentially need to do. We don't need to do each and every one of them every week. In fact, all
mhm,
the cooking ones, we don't have any like obligation around that that we have to have a meal every dinner time.
mhm,
What the principle is that we like to work with is working based on everyone tunes into their capacity for the
mhm.
week and their enthusiasm to do a task. So this is
Ah,
actually where we realized that we didn't like, with all the new things we wanted to get done in the house, like redecorating the living room and tidying up the garden and like sorting out all the unnecessary things in the kitchen. We didn't have the capacity or the willingness to also do all of the cleaning tasks. And then that went to the community mastery board, like, oh, the house is going to get dirty if we don't do the cleaning tasks. What do we do? The test was, why don't we try out getting a cleaner every 2 weeks?
mm, mm.
So that worked very well. It's become mastery now.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
But we still do take on some of the cleaning tasks because it's such a big house that the cleaner, we don't, and we want like, I'm particularly like have a little like financial scarcity at the moment. So I was like, oh, I don't want to have a cleaner every week. I can't really afford that. But if we could do it just every 2 weeks and I'll take on a few of the extra cleaning tasks, that works for me. So we still
Okay.
have cleaning tasks there. So we
Wow.
just like allocate like who's going to do what tasks for the next 2 weeks. Um, and that's it for the Kanban board.
Wait, question. Okay.
Yeah.
These color coded in any way? The other question is how do you generate tasks? Are these tasks always kind of recurring tasks? Is this what the Kanban board is for, or is it also for like one-off tasks, like someone
Mm.
the hole in the bike shed or something? I don't know.
It's for both. Yeah. So we started off with the basic tasks that were like, we definitely want to have those, which like each room was like clean living room, clean the downstairs bathroom, clean the kitchen.
Right.
And then each day of the week has like Monday dinner, Tuesday dinner, blah, blah, blah,
Huh?
each on a different sticky. And then we created extra notes as we went through the
Sorry.
community mastery board. That's all right.
How do you allocate dinner for the rest of the fortnight?
Um, so this is where we have a little bit of a gray zone at the moment, which we might need to address in our system. So we've got a every 2 week rhythm, but we only have meal sticky notes for like one Monday evening and one Tuesday evening. So ideally, we'd like create Monday evening one and Monday evening two so
Yeah.
that people can sign up. But yeah, so that would be an improvement because right now it's a bit confusing, and we end up just like doing it we actually end up doing it differently, where we just
Yeah.
send an app and a message in our Telegram group saying like, I'm going to make dinner this evening.
Yeah.
And it's a bit
Mm,
more like ad hoc. Some of us like to plan in advance when we're going to cook. As I'm like, for me, I'm like, I'm going to put it in my calendar. I'm going to cook on Wednesday because I
yeah.
have usually quite a lot of calls in the evening because of the US time zone, and so it's like, okay, I need to plan it in, and I like cooking for everyone, so I'm going to do it on Wednesday. And other people have much more flexibility because they work during the day and they're like rather just feel into when the energy is there in the moment.
Mm.
So this system of planning it in advance doesn't work perfectly well, and we might actually benefit from looking at a different way to do
Yeah,
that.
I think yeah, this is a very different way of how we do it in my house. Although I think this could be really useful, like um the Kanban board could be quite useful for us in some ways as well.
Mm.
Don't know.
How
Yeah.
what's one way that you do it differently in your house? I'm curious.
Um, so um I kind of like to kind of go back to not looking at this in
Yeah.
front of. Is that all right? Um, so uh, let's see. So you have like the meals. So you use the Kanban board for your meals, you use the Kanban board for your cleaning, and you use the Kanban board for like maintenance tasks. That's
Mm.
what I'm hearing. Is that,
Yeah.
did I capture all of it? Are there any other tasks that I've not like?
No, that's it. That's it. Yeah.
and maybe like I don't know, party setup tasks, but I would count that
Yeah.
as and like we have for meals, we have a meal board that shows 2 weeks at a
Mhm.
time, and you stick as you it's like Velcro. It's wood, but like there's Velcro for every day for every
Yeah.
person. So Monday and like Abby has like a Velcro, like yeah, and you stick the symbol on to show that okay, I'm gonna be in. Please cook for
Mhm.
me that day. Or there's also a symbol for save me some leftovers. I'm gonna be in late.
Yeah.
Or and there's a symbol for I'm cooking, and there's also a symbol for don't cook for me. I'm not in.
Cool.
You could just leave it blank, and we'll just guess.
Yeah, that's cool. I've seen something similar like that before as well. We kind of considered that, but what we decided was just like, if you're cooking a meal, can you just make it for everyone? And if there's leftovers, put them in the fridge, and we all enjoy it the next day for lunch. And that's been working pretty well so
Okay.
far. Yeah,
All right. I
yeah,
mean, I don't think there's. I think it's whatever works for every house, as long as you have some kind
definitely,
of system that tracks that. If communal cooking is what the culture of your group share, I can totally imagine
definitely.
intentional. Actually, can you have an intentional house share without some element of like shared cooking, shared meals in some way? Uh,
Hmm.
my suspicion is like no. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think you can. I think what is so important is that you talk before about what do you want from living together.
Yeah.
Like we had the conversation beforehand about like all of our ideas around how we cook and like and do this together was based off a conversation at the very start of like what's your dream for how you interact in the house and like what visions do you have and what would make you feel
Mm,
fulfilled and like joyful about living together.
mm.
Um, and
So
so if everyone was like, I actually don't like cooking together, I don't like eating together, I actually don't want that degree of like, I don't want that to be a thing that we share together. That's not wrong. That's like, if you want that, that could be really great. If that's not what you want, to not have that intentionally, you know.
okay, yeah,
Um, as I think there need to be. The thing is, though, commensality, the act of eating together, is just such a like since
yeah.
like
It's such a glue.
thousands of years, a thing that bonds human beings together. It's yeah, it's very powerful.
I think maybe that's what I actually mean when I say no. I don't mean you can't do it without some element of shared food. I mean, the reason why I say no is like I'm actually saying no to is there's no kind of shared ritual of some sort that brings
Yeah,
everyone together quite naturally and it isn't like a meeting or it isn't like
yeah,
a I don't know, like maybe
exactly.
your shared living situation, it's more naturally meditating together in the
Mhm.
morning. And if that literally comes way more naturally for your group than eating together, then cool, great. I'm so glad
Yeah,
for you. I've not come across a group like that before. I would love to meet a group like that, just so I can say I have.
yeah. I'm
But
thinking of like a group of breatharians or something, and they're like, we don't do eating, but we gaze at the sun together. And
we,
but I'll tell
we
you a funny, interesting experiment I did with that. Like in lockdown, I was staying at my parents' house, and it
Mhm.
was me and my younger brother and my parents. Um, then my parents and I decided that we wanted to do some fasting for 24 hours, and it was unreal how much it like just like how disconnected I felt from everybody because we had every meal shared together, like especially lunch and dinner.
Yeah.
And when there wasn't that lunch and dinner, we just didn't sit down and have interesting or good conversations together. And my brother did eat. He didn't want to fast, and he was just like, "This sucks. You guys are just like off on your own thing, and like I don't know what's going on. No one's around." And I think we would have had like we didn't have any other rhythms or structures to harmonize or to congregate around
Mm,
when we dropped the idea of eating together. So we might have, as you said, like maybe if we were going to do that long term or regularly, we could instead set up another way of coming together, like meditating or doing a yoga class together or going intentionally going for a walk or something like that. Um,
mm.
yeah, I think you'd
But
need to find intentional ways to replace shared meals to keep a sense of like tribe connection going.
Mhm. And I just think, yeah, that's it is very, very often meals, really, um, in most communities. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Um,
totally.
I'm just gonna kind of rattle a bit on what my house does in regards to cleaning,
Yeah,
maintenance, tasks,
love
and
to hear.
all that. And then maybe we might start to wrap up because I'm noticing the time, and maybe we'll come back for a part two because
Yeah,
we are like got like a third way through our like agenda topics, sorry, agenda list. Anyway,
so great. Yeah, how
um,
about you? Yeah, tell more about your experience.
okay, so that's what we do for meals. We've got the meal board. We don't have a Kanban board for meals. I guess we just have a. And sometimes there are some people who plan it a week in advance and go like, okay, I'm cooking on Wednesday. And there are people who just decide on the day. That's great. That as long as it's communicated in some way, and it's that would be communicated through the chat sometimes as well, or you just hear the dinner bell. Well, we don't have a dinner bell. We have a dinner duck. They, they like I'm not into it as much, but we have a horn that sounds like a it's but it's shaped like a duck and you just like blow on it when dinner's ready. Yeah. Sometimes that's how you find out dinner's ready rather than the chat or the board or whatever. I don't know. I think and I can totally see some people might want that more stability around dinner and knowing if dinner's going to be cooked or not. But I don't know. I think as a group, we're all okay with that level of flexibility. And
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
so that's the meal board. For cleaning, we have like a fixed kind of like rota that keeps rotating. So it's just a table, and on top we have 5 different areas, and then people's names just keep rotating. So on this week, I'm doing the corridors, and then
Mm.
vacuuming, and the next week I'm doing the bathrooms, and then the next week I'm doing the kitchen. Next week I'm doing the bins, and then next week I'm doing the lounge and dining area tidy. Yeah. So
Mhm.
those are the main 5 areas that we identified for our house.
Mhm.
And we just like keep rotating. I don't know. Personally, I really like that system, and there's less kind of decision making needed per week. And I've also lived in a house where we allocated cleaning tasks regularly at our monthly or bi-monthly house meetings. And I personally, for me, I found that really stressful because everyone always went for the same tasks all the time.
Mm.
Toilet, for example, they always did the vacuuming, and I was like, I like doing the vacuuming too, and I'm now left with bins. I hate bins. um, but so yeah, that's that's how we do cleaning. And then maintenance tasks. I think we could really benefit with a Kanban for the maintenance tasks because we currently just kind of like write it into the minutes of our meeting, whoever's agreed
Mm.
what, and then that's it.
Mm.
We don't
Gotcha.
don't really like remember. We don't really look back at previous minutes. We kind of just like keep it in our minds roughly. And we do get things done, and things definitely get done. People are kind of reminded if it was something that they agreed to do previous time, then we'll remind them a month later, like, oh, you said you would do this. Have you done it? Um, but yeah, I think a visual aid like a Kanban board could really help. And I'd be really interested in like seeing if like a community mastery board could really help our house as well. Uh,
Mm.
yeah, and maybe we can dive more into that in the next episode. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
Do you have
already excited.
any thoughts?
Yeah, I just as you were speaking, I think one of the main things for me to highlight from all that we've shared is it's really valuable that you're sharing your the scenario in your co-living right now, Abby, and me mine. I really hope that, like, for me, every single co-living experiment has been a different context. And if you try and like see a community like a robot that you just try and like get the filters just right and adjust, and then you think it's just gonna okay, now we've figured it out, and it's gonna be like this forever, you'll eventually run into the fact that like life is not robotic. Like there like the system needs to evolve as your community evolves. And that's why like as you said, like for me with the for us we only been here 2 months, and this system has been really helpful for us to get set up, and I'm totally expecting and hope that as we evolve we might even find the community mastery board doesn't make sense, and we might like
Yeah.
in the community mastery board, it might meta evolve from within itself when we try out a different form of doing it, you know? And
Yeah.
that's the joy of being really iterative about any of these systems, that you're always having time to like reflect on how's it going, what's working, what's not working, what do you want to try differently in like really small chunks. Just makes it much easier to make change when you're trying small experiments, and much more fun to grow together, and much easier to discover like to
Mm.
get people to move along when we're like, oh, I'm just trying it for 2 weeks, rather than suddenly we're going to try something that's forever. There's a few
Yeah.
basic principles that I find really important to remember. Yeah.
And it's really lovely in co-living compared to, say, I don't know, at work. I feel um that it's the environment kind of feels a bit more stable, and there are fewer knobs to break. I don't know. This is how I feel in
Yeah.
comparison to, say, if I did a community mastery board for my work, for example. I don't know. I think it'd be really interesting. I would almost kind of would like to try and imagine it. But yeah, I feel like in there's less room for things that, like, what, as long as you all care for each other, like, I feel like there's less room for things to kind of go wrong, kind of
Mm,
in a co-living project in some ways, when you're collaborating with each other. Um like,
yeah.
the stakes aren't as high as when you're in a worker co-op, for example. Yeah.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Economic ventures have different elements. Yeah. That's a whole new context.
Um, Also, what's it? I mean, the project is an economic venture in some ways,
True. Domestic economy. Yeah. Or, yeah,
but
you're sharing rent
you're
and
not
that
as
kind of,
dependent on it, say, as for you. You
yeah,
know, if the salary comes from a worker co-op, then yeah,
totally.
there is more at stake. But you know,
Yeah.
you are doing rent. You are, for example, in your house sharing a cleaner. That
Yeah. Maybe I
is,
meant more business venture, not economic venture. Yeah.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, no. Sorry, I just it's heart bounced onto these tiny details. Sorry.
No, totally. Very important.
Okay. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm hoping in our next one we can. Yeah, we didn't get around to like talking about how to select people, did we? Oh well.
Mm,
And there's I'm sure there's so many other things around good co-living, as well, that we could point
yeah,
to. Yeah, and let's explore that in the next conversation. Yeah.
totally. And in the meantime, if someone's watching this and you're like, "Oh, I have all these questions," it'd be so good to like get your questions in the comments, and then in the second video, maybe we can even like answer some questions from listeners. That could be really interesting as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I would
let's see.
encourage that. Cool.
Yeah. Yoo-hoo. Thank you, Abby. Such a great invitation. I love talking about this. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Jocelyn.
Yeah.